million thank you to all of you who took time to attend this webinar amid the pandemic that we are facing today as a country. And good morning. My name is Mokowe. I am the administrator for this particular platform. As this is a webinar which depends largely on connectivity, please expect some delays in transmission, so the voice might be ahead or the video might be ahead or vice versa. Secondly, be advised that this platform did not allow us to collect your HPCSA registration numbers. So shortly, you will be requested to submit the same to us so that we can allocate points and send you your certificates. To ensure attendance, we will be asking questions throughout the sessions to ensure that everybody's still paying attention. We request you to respond to the question when it comes so that we can ensure that we are still there. Otherwise, we will not be able to allocate points to those who did not answer or those who do not stay throughout the entire session. As you know, this is a 2-hour, 2 CPD point session. So we would really appreciate that people stay throughout the session so that you can get your points. I know some of you might be asking what is BlueKonnect all about? Well, our simple answer is that as healthcare practitioners, we are faced with so many challenges that threaten our financial viability, our clinical independence, and our relevance and existence. The remuneration model imposed on us by medical aid threatens our financial viability. The outsiders who look into the health space and think that there is money in healthcare challenge our clinical independence. The fourth industrial revolution challenges our existence. Whilst that is a concern, what is more concerning, however, is that as healthcare practitioners, we are not even talking about these challenges. If we are not talking about the challenges, chances are we're not even doing anything about them. One of the reasons we are not talking is that we are so fragmented as a collective that we find it difficult to talk across our man-made borders. We all belong or associate with specific organizations, groups, and countries, and as a result, we are unable to talk to other groups or organizations or countries because they are not one of us. So BlueKonnect is a platform that aims to break those barriers. The BlueKonnect and its character termed Blue aims to provide a platform that will facilitate and promote connections, dialogues, and sharing of information amongst healthcare practitioners. Blue, as the color of the sky and the sea, is associated with stability, tranquility, and calmness. It symbolizes trust, wisdom, intelligence, faith, and truth. Most importantly, it is not associated with any group in racial or organization or otherwise. So it is an independent platform that aims to create blue discussion space in healthcare in Africa. And note that I said healthcare because the idea is that we do not want to create boundaries amongst professions. So it is essentially a space that is full of wisdom, trust, intelligence, and truth. And it aims to facilitate robust, reliable, intelligent, and thought-provoking debate and interactions amongst healthcare practitioners. So in the next few days, we will not only receive CPD points, but we'll also be receiving discussions and debates from people that are influential or significant in our industry. Only through such debates can we really move forward as a sector and provide solutions. Excuse me. Now, allow me to introduce our presenter, Professor H.L. Sithole, who most of you, if not all of you, know. Professor Sithole is a full professor at the University of Limpopo. Before joining University of Limpopo, he held various positions at various universities, which includes being a lecturer at UKZN, and he held a position at UNISA in the Research Directorate. He was a deputy director at the Tshwane University of Technology. Professor Sithole operated his practice in Pretoria for a number of years whilst at UNISA. As such, he has a wealth of experience not only in practice, but also in teaching and research. Professor Sithole, you can take over and come in.
Thank you, Mr. Kowe. Thank you, MD. Good morning, colleagues. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. As Mr. Kowe has already indicated, to those of you who do not know me, my name is Lawrence Sithole. Well, as is indicated already, I've recently, well, not so recent anymore, been appointed as a professor in the Department of Optometry at the University of Limpopo. So I welcome you. And of course, I would also want to convey a special word of welcome to my postgraduate students who are joining us this morning in this presentation. I'll be presenting on diagnosing normal tension glaucoma. And also, I will give a case report of a patient that I have seen whom I have diagnosed with this condition. So for me, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, it is such a privilege and honor to be sharing this information with you as my colleagues in the eye healthcare fraternity. Now, with that said, I welcome you once more. Now, maybe before we start, let me say this, that this is not a physical contact presentation. So I would urge you to be there, sitting there and listening, and please do not sleep. Because there's not much that I can do to make sure that you are awake. You just have to listen to this voice, and there may be distractions in the background, but please bear with me. So, but then again, as I was saying, that before we start, let me just take this opportune moment to pay tribute to our legendary Professor Olelekan Oduntan, who passed on a few weeks ago. He was my supervisor when I was doing my master's and my PhD. He was also a co-author in a number of scientific journals that we co-published. May his soul rest in peace. Professor Oduntan has not been buried yet. He's still lying in a morgue in Lagos. As soon as the ban on travel is lifted, I hope that his children will be able to go to Nigeria to organize his funeral. And so some of us, if we have some financial muscles, will also try and go in this and rather be part of the activities that side. Now, coming to today's presentation, ladies and gentlemen, as I've indicated that it is on normal tension glaucoma, let us have a brief overview of what I'm going to touch on today. We'll have a brief introduction on this subject matter and also touch on some theories, or rather some literature on glaucoma, which will be building towards normal tension glaucoma. Of course, we'll also look at some early and contemporary definitions as well as associated risk factors for glaucoma. And of course, as I've indicated, we'll also look at the case report. We'll be looking at the findings, the management thereof, and the recommendations that I made as part of this. Now, let us start off. If you look at our first slide there, it alludes to the fact that 60 million people are affected worldwide by glaucoma. Now, for one to understand and appreciate the extent to which glaucoma is an important public health problem, one needs to pay attention to its epidemiological aspects as well as the context of its prevalence. And this is where we as optometrists need to make a meaningful contribution, because we are practicing here in South Africa, in the cities, in the far-flung areas of our country. We see a lot of these patients who come with, say, glaucoma, for example. Sometimes we diagnose them positively, sometimes not. We miss the diagnosis. So for me, notably is that a prevalence, or rather, let me say, as a prevalence indicator, the disease accounts for, say, 15% of blindness in Africa. And it is the second leading cause of blindness in South Africa. Now, colleagues, as you might know, our blindness prevalence is currently sitting at just over 0.75%, with cataract being a major contributor to this scourge of blindness. Now, this is what worries me. The black majority are the ones that are mostly affected by this condition and are residing mostly in the far-flung areas of our country, in the villages where there are very limited resources. And that is also exacerbated by poverty. We'll maybe talk about that at some other point. And of course, maybe to a certain extent, it is also influenced by salient beliefs within those communities that influence the uptake of services. So I wouldn't want to say that there is glaucoma in the villages, in the far-flung areas of our country, simply because we don't have enough resources. But that can be a reason as well. that we may not be having enough or adequate resources, but the salient beliefs within the communities which are endemic within the communities may be contributory factors as well that make those people within those communities not to uptake services that may be freely available. So that is another area that we may have to look at. Now, one other problem for me, as I'm still talking about politics in healthcare as part of my introduction, colleagues, this condition contributes to the number of unwarranted cases of avoidable blindness in South Africa and the world at large. Now, do you remember the World Health Organization's Vision 2020? Some of you might remember. Are we in line to meet the target of Vision 2020? So for me, it will be interesting to see if the target has been met, because we're already in 2020, or whether we are close enough to meeting these targets of 2020. So it will be interesting, and I believe that researchers like myself and others from other universities will be looking into it. So as optometrists, we have a much bigger role to play in ensuring that this vision is met. And we can only do so by ensuring that we practice our profession to the tilt. Now, what do I mean by this? Population studies, colleagues, they suggest that over 80% of glaucoma, that's a huge number, 80% of glaucoma cases are missed every year in the US. Now, of course, these population studies are saying in the US, but it doesn't really matter. We are part of what is happening everywhere in the world. This may therefore be also true for South Africa. As a matter of fact, most of the instruments that we use to diagnose glaucoma, to analyze the results for glaucoma patients, they use normative data of Europeans and Americans and other populations, not necessarily African populations. So we are affected by this. So now, my question to you is, how many cases of glaucoma have you had, say, in the past 6 months? Just as an example. Now, if you are currently practicing as an optometrist and have been seeing those over 40 years of age and haven't had any case, I'm worried. It doesn't mean that, okay, maybe, well, let me say, it doesn't mean that you have had only false negatives of glaucoma cases. Chances are that, of course, you just miss them. Because if you look at my slide, it says it accounts for approximately 5% of blindness among those older than 40 years. Now, how many patients have you seen who are over 40 years and you have not diagnosed with glaucoma? So, as you can see, it's a very serious disease. We need to be careful when we examine our patients. We need to take our time. We cannot rush through our patient examinations, because otherwise this condition will just continue to contribute to the unwarranted cases of avoidable blindness in South Africa and also in the world. And talking about the world, let me allude to what I've heard President Donald Trump talking about. He's currently advocating for the use of hydroxychloroquine in the management of COVID-19. Now, interestingly, because I'm following this news every day, there's one doctor, Dr. Fauci, I think is the director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases in the US. He is saying that although President Donald Trump is advocating for the use of hydroxychloroquine in the treatment of COVID-19, researchers have indicated that this drug has some serious side effects, such as those that weaken the immune system. But of interest to me as an optometrist is that it also has the propensity to cause blindness. This is the drug that we're talking about. Now, what are the chances of doctors here in South Africa using hydroxychloroquine also in the management of COVID-19 and precipitating this scourge of blindness through the use of this drug? I've done some studies a number of years ago where I've discovered that malaria, if you have severe malaria, there may be some retinal manifestation of malaria in the eye. Now, and you see, for you to see this, chances are, after this sketch, I mean, by yesterday we had about 1,749 positive cases for COVID-19. Chances are, if it is possible that, if it is possible that some of the doctors within our country are using chloroquine in the management of this, it is possible that some of the patients that you might see, depending on where you are, they might come with ocular manifestations of the use of, or extensive use of chloroquine, which may cause blindness over time. We know that malaria itself does cause malarial retinopathy, and it has got those distinctive manifestations different from your hypertensive retinopathy, your diabetic retinopathy, for example. In malaria, you are likely to see the whitening of the foveal area and the capillaries in the retina. So you should be in a position to be able to detect these things as an optometrist as and when they are presented to you. Colleagues, enough about health politics. Going back to my slides, primary open-angle glaucoma, as you can see, it is the predominant type of the disease. So in most cases, when we talk about glaucoma, we are actually referring to primary open-angle glaucoma, as indicated there. Although it may be fairly easy to diagnose, the problem is it may be easily missed as well. So again, I'll go back to that question. How many have you missed so far? Just look at the way you practice your optometry. Wherever you are, in your office, alone, at the comfort of your office, how many have you diagnosed positively? Now, for me, it is time to jack up our efforts as optometrists and use our clinical acumen correctly to diagnose and refer these patients appropriately. There are those of us who are having therapeutics. Those who have therapeutics manage these patients properly in order to flatten the curve of blindness due to glaucoma. We have our own curve that needs to be flattened, colleagues, as optometrists, as cadres in the eye healthcare fraternity. Are we flattening this curve? I wouldn't want to see, after this presentation, any one of us still going on and miss, especially normal tension glaucoma. Now, let's look at the first, at the second slide there. Now, in this slide, we're looking at definitions. There's an early definition of glaucoma and a contemporary definition of glaucoma. Now, if you look at the early definition, in other words, the older definition that was used to describe what glaucoma is, it talks to, in a simplified fashion, it talks to progressive bilateral neuropathy of the optic nerve. Now, colleagues, in my over 15 years of optometric practice and conference presentations, both locally and internationally, I've learned not to take anything for granted with my audience. And even in this case, I'm not going to take anything for granted. Here we're talking about progressive bilateral neuropathy of the optic nerve. What is neuropathy? Because if you don't understand these small things, then you will miss it. You will always diagnose glaucoma on the basis of IOP. Now, in simple terms, simply put, it's nerve damage. Now, if you look at the contemporary definition, IOP is not included. Rather, it is just considered a risk factor. Now, again, not taking anything to chance, what do we mean by a risk factor? So this is why I wish I could be seeing you and then ask these questions and then we engage. But I'm hoping that you are listening and we're moving together. Now, from an epidemiological perspective, it's just a variable associated with an increased risk of a disease. So today, glaucoma, it's simply understood to be just a group of diseases of the optic nerve. But now, of interest, it is that the common feature in this definition is the optic nerve degeneration. So it's simply just a neurodegenerative disorder of the optic nerve, which is characterized by retinal ganglion cells loss. I hope that is clear. Now, colleagues, for me, what is interesting again is that there could be other causes for glaucoma. And one of the major causes that in most cases we don't talk about is what we call ocular perfusion pressure. As you can see there in the slide, it says it's expressed as a difference between arterial blood pressure and IOP. A number of years ago, while I was still a lecturer at UKZN, with my final year group of students, we did a study trying to compare blood pressure, systemic blood pressure, and IOP to find if there was some correlations. And indeed, we did find that there were some correlations. But as and when you go on and on and on, you realize that some of the correlations perhaps were a bit exaggerated. But it's a matter for contestation at another level. But we'll talk about that in a bit. No, so now, what is this ocular perfusion pressure? What do you understand by it? Simply put, it is the energy that is required to enable blood to flow. In other words, this pressure propels blood within the blood vessels in the retina to reach certain intended parts of the eye or tissues within a particular region in the eye. Now, my question is, how does then poor ocular perfusion affect the optic nerve? Because most of the things with glaucoma, they happen, the problem, we need to concentrate more also on the optic nerve. What is actually happening within the optic nerve? And ocular perfusion pressure plays a major role there. Because if there's not enough blood supply to the tissues within the optic nerve, then something is happening there that will precipitate the advent of glaucoma. Now, so my question to you now is, how will poor ocular perfusion affect the optic nerve? Colleagues, the answer is right at your disposal, right in front of you. It may cause ischemia and poor irrigation of the optic nerve tissues, thus resulting in the advent of glaucoma as we know it. Perhaps maybe the next question that one can ask is, what are the causative factors of poor ocular perfusion? What really causes this poor ocular perfusion within the eye? As you can see in the next slide, low ocular perfusion may be due to low BP or relatively high OP. Now, I've used the word relatively high OP strategically, because you see now, IOP does not really mean much. It doesn't mean anything. Like I said, it is simply just a risk factor that may determine whether one has glaucoma or not. So by looking at IOP alone, you cannot diagnose somebody with glaucoma. Now, how will low BP then affect ocular perfusion pressure? It's simple. Think about it. This may mean that there may not be enough pressure in the vessels, thus causing inadequate supply to the optic nerve tissues. I hope that is clear. It's simple. Like I've indicated, that I've done some studies, and high IOP was also flagged not to necessarily cause glaucoma. But also, you cannot exclude low IOP. I'll talk about that in no time. Now, what am I driving to? This is what I'm trying to say. That it is possible that you may have higher IOP, but still have no nerve damage. And this is when we start talking about what we call ocular hypertension. In other words, you have high IOP, you examine your patient, you don't see any structural damage, then what do you have? Chances are you're just having ocular hypertension. A few weeks ago, my son was complaining of his eyes. Being the optometrist that I am, I checked his IOPs. My son is 9 years old. I checked his IOPs. They were sitting at around 21 in the right eye and 22 in the left eye. I became worried. Like, this boy, only 21. Then I looked at the back of his eye. I took my ophthalmoscope. I looked at the back of his eye. I could see that there is some cupping there. That got me even more worried. Then I went to Montana Hospital. There's an ophthalmologist that I used to work with. And then I went in there, and then we did an OCT. And then we found that there was actually nothing to worry about based on what the OCT was saying. And we'll talk about that. You see, I want to talk about these normative values that we normally depend on most of the times. Even ourselves as researchers, lecturers in the universities, we pin students to normative values to say, if a patient comes with this is what you must find, it must be within these limits. And sometimes, let me tell you, that those things don't work. And we had a discussion with this ophthalmologist to say that even blood pressure as we know it today, that it is systemic over diastolic, it's okay, that is correct. But the value that it is 120/80, is it correct for the African majority? Physicians are moving into believing that actually the correct blood pressure is 116/74. Far away from the normative values that we always talk about. So it doesn't mean that if somebody comes with a higher IOP, then you should be excited and say, well, to an optometrist, if something is abnormal, it's not conforming to what you normally see every day, it must be exciting. Although it may not be exciting to the patient because it's a disease, but it is an interesting case to you as an optometrist. But in this case, this was my son, it was not an interesting case. It was rather a bizarre case. So we looked at the readings of the OCT and we realized that, look, he is fine. Then we just took those results as a baseline for future engagement when I take him back to the ophthalmologist for further engagement in the next 8 to 10 months. And that's when we'll see whether there's indeed something to worry about or not. So you see now, low IOP, low blood pressure, they just disturb the mechanism of blood flow in the blood vessels within the eye, and that may lead to glaucoma. And that's where we talk about issues like vascular dysregulation. Now, similarly, colleagues, talking about ocular hypertension, similarly, or on the contrary, let me put it that way, there can be a low IOP with nerve damage, right? Initially, we said there can be higher IOP with no structural damage. And your IOP results may be off limits. In other words, may not be confirming to the normative data that you refer to. We normally say that normal blood pressure, rather normal IOP, it's between 10 to 21 millimeters of mercury. That is what the normative data are saying. But that may be true for a certain population, but not for everyone. And that is why we talk about ocular hypertension. But on the contrary, you can have a low IOP, but this time with a structural damage, with a nerve damage. Now, that's when we start talking about normal tension glaucoma. Does it make sense? I think it's simple. It's simple. In other words, IOP does not generally lead to glaucoma, as you can see in the next slide, with those characteristic pattern of optic neuropathy that's causing optic nerve head cupping and field visual field loss. Now, of course, the risk factors of primary open glaucoma, they include those that I've already alluded to, but they may also, we need to appreciate issues of refractive error as well, such as your myopia, which is greater than 3 diopters, if you're a male, and also if you use alcohol and all of that. And literature says that ocular hypertension is also just a predisposing factor for primary open glaucoma. So it does not really mean much, but it is important for you to consider in the final analysis so that you may know exactly what you are dealing with. So, like I've indicated, as you can see in the slide, that there is usually no optic nerve head damage, and IOP may be greater than 21 millimeters of mercury, which is just something that we normally use as optometrists to gauge whether one might be having glaucoma or not. Now, one of the fundamental aspects of diagnosing glaucoma is the consideration of the neuroretinal rim following what we call the ISNT configuration. Now, interestingly, this is exactly what helped me in diagnosing the patient that I saw a number of years ago with normal tension glaucoma. I based my diagnosis not on the IOP. Of course, it was normal tension because the IOP was within normal limits, but of greater concern to me was what I saw. If you look at this picture there, if you use the ISNT configuration in analyzing the neuroretinal rim thickness, this is what you're going to see. If you look at the inferior neuroretinal rim, it's thicker, in line with the ISNT configuration, the ISNT configuration, as I've indicated. So according to this configuration, it says that the inferior neuroretinal rim should be greater or equals to the superior neuroretinal rim. If you look at the two, look at the superior neuroretinal rim and look at the inferior one. You can see that the inferior is slightly bigger than the superior one. In other instances, they may be the same in size. That doesn't mean anything really. It's no abnormality. It's okay. It's acceptable. Now, this configuration further goes to say that the superior neuroretinal rim must be greater or equals to the nasal neuroretinal rim. If you look at the nasal neuroretinal rim and the superior one, they're almost of the same size, isn't it? So that is expected. So that is normal. It's within limits. But of interest to me is that the nasal neuroretinal rim should be greater than or equals to the temporal neuroretinal rim. But in this case, you can see that the temporal neuroretinal rim is slightly thinner as compared to the nasal one. And if you look at it, colleagues, from this, you can already see that it means the vertical CD ratio will be less than, no. Yes, I'm right. The vertical
Prof. Sithole?
SI superior inferior CD ratio.
Prof. Sithole, can you just repeat that? I think you got cut there for a moment.
Yes, Mr. Admin. I was still talking about one of the fundamental aspects that you need to consider in diagnosing glaucoma. Now, I was talking about the ISNT configuration that helps you to look at the thickness of the neuroretinal rim. Now, I'm saying you must look at the ISNT configuration in this manner. you start with the inferior rim. The inferior neuroretinal rim should be greater or equals to the superior neuroretinal rim. Now, if you look at this picture here, you can see that the inferior neuroretinal rim is much bigger in thickness than the superior neuroretinal rim. In other words, in certain instances, you might find this to be equal. It depends on the patient. Also, you may find that the superior neuroretinal rim is greater or equals to, it's greater than or equals to the nasal neuroretinal rim. That's what you are likely to find. Also, you may find that the the nasal neuroretinal rim is greater than or is equals to the temporal neuroretinal rim. Now, in other words, there are possibilities that the nasal neuroretinal rim may be equals to the temporal neuroretinal rim. This rule allows for that possibility, but in most cases, you realize that they're not equal. In this case, they're not equal, as you can see. So what does that mean? It means that the horizontal CD ratio is more likely to be bigger than the vertical CD ratio in this instance. And as I was indicating, that this is what helped me in diagnosing my patient with normal tension glaucoma. I studied the disc as is using the ISNT configuration. Now, another factor that one may need to consider, colleagues, is the nasalization of the vessels in glaucoma. Now, that is not apparent in this picture, but maybe one can notice that some of the blood vessels are more towards the nasal. It may not be apparent, but I think I have another picture where this is clearly depicted. Of course, colleagues, you may also need to consider when you measure your IOP, your central corneal thickness, which sometimes is considered in ocular hypertension. By the way, which instrument do we use to measure central corneal thickness? I don't think many optometrists have this equipment, but if you don't, universities have this equipment. I know that at the University of Limpopo, we pride ourselves with the number of equipment that we have. We have sophisticated, an array of sophisticated machinery in that university. And I know that we do have the packing meter that we use to measure the central corneal thickness as well. So that may influence the IOP. So in most cases, you'll find that if the cornea is thicker, even the IOP itself will be high. Let me repeat that. When you consider central corneal thickness, the thickness of the cornea has the propensity to determine the IOP. In other words, thinner corneas, in thinner corneas, you are likely to get low IOP. I just wanted to make sure that I hear myself as I say this, and make sure that I don't confuse you. In thinner corneas, you are likely to get low IOP as compared to in thicker corneas, where you are likely to get higher IOPs. And also research supports that. So it is something that you need to consider when you are measuring when you are measuring your IOP. So, but then again, colleagues, if you look at that slide, it says that larger CD ratio is not a risk factor for glaucoma. Of course, yes. What if a patient has a larger disc? Would you actually also expect that the cupping will be small? It's not possible. If you look at a truck, a truck as you know it, a vehicle, a truck, you don't expect it to have small wheels because it's big. So it should have bigger wheels. So what if somebody come now or present with a bigger disc? Would you also expect a smaller disc so that you may fit with the normative data? No. So there are certain factors that you need to consider. It doesn't really mean much. It's just simply a sign of an early glaucomatous damage within the eye. It's just a sign. It may not necessarily mean that there's glaucomatous damage. So you need to do your homework thoroughly. Now, however, it says that a patient with large CD ratio and altered by glaucoma may be at risk for glaucoma. It is possible. These are just possibilities. They are not cut and dry. They are not casted in stone. You cannot just by looking at this and say, okay, because this is what I find now, it means now my patient has glaucoma. You can't say that. But rather, those should view this picture. If you look at the two arrows there, you see the thinning of the temporal neuroretinal rim as compared to the nasal neuroretinal rim. Now, the inferior and the superior are almost equal, which is in line with what the Ising rule is saying. Now, what you see also here is that there is the nasalization of the blood vessels. You see, there's a shift of the blood vessels towards the nasal area. And that will actually help you in determining whether this person has glaucoma or not. Now, in most instances, you'll also see that there will be what they call laminar trabeculation or pores that may appear as grayish dots in the basement of the physiological cup. Now, I've seen this in my son's case. I could see the lamina cribrosa, which was striated, and that really, worried me a bit.
Sithole?
And hence,
Sithole?
Yes.
Can you just hang on for a minute? I see a lot of people are saying that they've lost connection. Let's just confirm that everyone is back on. Just hang on.
Okay.
Can I request people to just indicate if they can hear? Just on the polls. Okay. Thank you. You can proceed, sir. I think most of people are back.
Okay. I was still saying that if you look at the two arrows there, you can see that now there is a narrowing of the neuroretinal rim on the temporal side as compared to the nasal side of this picture or of the disc. Now, also, if you look at the superior neuroretinal rim and the inferior neuroretinal rim, there is a bit of equality, which is in line with the ISNT configuration. Now, notably, it's the nasalization of the blood vessels, as you can see there. Now, in most cases, as I was indicating, you'll also see the laminar trabeculation, which normally appears as grayish dots in the basement of the physiological cup. Now, I've also indicated that I've seen something of this sort also in my son's case a few weeks ago, where I could see the striated laminar cribrosa as well. And that's actually what gave me problems there. But now, with OCT, you will also then be able to see if there's any nerve fiber loss, which we'll talk about in the case of my patients. Now, this just adds to the complexity of ensuring that you are meticulous in your approach as an optometrist when you are dealing with patients that you may suspect to be having glaucoma. Now, if you look at the literature, studies have recently showed that some patients diagnosed with glaucoma had normal range IOP. So it goes back to this normative data thing to say, sometimes it must be specific to certain populations. You cannot just use a blanket normative data to determine IOP. On average, 30 to 40% patients had glaucomatous visual field defects, but with normal IOP in one of the studies. And in another study conducted by that fellow there, it was revealed that over 90% of patients diagnosed with glaucoma had normal IOP. Now, look, if over 90% of patients diagnosed with glaucoma had normal IOP, can you then see that IOP is actually just a risk factor for glaucoma? It doesn't tell you that one has glaucoma if you happen to find it being over the normative data that we normally rely on to determine IOP. So therefore, this calls for a better understanding of the pathogenesis of the disease, as I was indicating, including issues of ocular perfusion pressure that may be affected by the diameter of the vessels that will allow blood to be propelled into intended tissues within the optic nerve. So those are the things that you need to consider, as it is indicated in my slide, that this further calls for a comprehensive eye examination and early diagnosis by yourselves and myself as an optometrist. Now, let's come to this case report that I said we will also look at. It was in 2013 when I saw a 25-year-old female patient who came for routine eye examination. Actually, this lady, she had not come to see me. I was sharing my premises with, or rather my practice with the dentist. She had actually come to see the dentist. Now, you know, patients with medical aids. Now, after seeing the dentist, she saw me sitting there waiting for patients, as I would normally do. She saw me sitting there and she said, "Doc, I've never had an eye examination and I have a medical aid. Perhaps you should use my medical aid, you know, and examine my eyes. But you know what? I can see very well." This is what she told me. She said, you know, patients are concerned mainly with how well they see at a distance, especially younger patients. Their concern is that, okay, if I see well at a distance, what else do I want? What else can an optometrist tell me? Now I said to her, okay, fine, not a problem. Sit down. Did my case history. I also took blood pressures. The blood pressure was within normal limits. It was okay. She had no known systemic diseases or family history of glaucoma. Now, the IOP measured in the right eye 16 millimeters of mercury, in the left eye 14 millimeters of mercury, and I was using the eye care rebound tonometer at the time. And I did not verify these readings, as research indicated that the eye care rebound tonometer is relatively reliable. So I was happy with the findings. Then I took an ophthalmoscope, and this is what I saw. But this picture, I must acknowledge the source. It is from Dr. Dyer from the Eye Institute in Pretoria. He took these pictures and he sent them to me. Now, with my direct ophthalmoscope, I could be able to see, I could see what was actually happening in the back of the eye. Remember the isn't rule that I was talking about? If you look at the right eye, the neuroretinal rim, it's much thinner. The neuroretinal rim on the temporal side, it's much thinner compared to the neuroretinal rim on the nasal side. The superior and the inferior are almost equal, which is in line with the isn't configuration. I'm sure you are happy with that. But for me, now remember, the isn't rule says that the neuroretinal rim on the nasal side must be greater or equals to the neuroretinal rim on the temporal side. Let me repeat that so that we don't miss each other. The ISI inferior, N nasal, S superior, N nasal, T temporal. Now it says that the nasal neuroretinal rim must be greater than or equals to the temporal neuroretinal rim. Now, if you see this one, this picture here, there's no equality. there's no chance of equals to. There's only a chance of greater than. Remember, there are two options there. It says nasal must be greater than or equals to. All I see is greater than. There's no equals to. That is a no content slash. If it comes to equality, there's no equality. You can't talk. You can't start talking equality there. Now, the moment I saw that, I got worried. I was like, no, this is too thin. I know my normal cup or my normal disc. I know how it looks like, but this isn't. This is not the right one. This is not the normal one. And I compared this with the left one. And then you can also see the CD ratio as per my estimations there. I don't know whether I got it right. Let me see. No. You know, in hindsight, when I look at this, I don't think it was correct. No, wait. No, I'm looking at the pressure. No, I think I was right, because I think I indicated that the CD ratio in the right eye was smaller than that in the left eye. So in other words, the one in the left eye was bigger than the one in the right eye. Please don't be confused. So based on this, based on what I saw using a direct ophthalmoscope, which does not give me that stereoscopic view. So some of you may be advantaged enough to have your BIOs and all that. If you have that, you should use that to your advantage. Or also, maybe you have your fundus cameras. You take nice pictures and study these pictures and refer patients properly once you suspect glaucoma. Now, after seeing that, I referred the patient to the ophthalmologist at the Pretoria Eye Institute. And I remember I did indicate, let me go back to that picture. I did indicate that the CD ratio in the right eye was sitting at 0.3, and the CD ratio in the left eye was sitting at around 0.4. I did indicate it. I'm just looking at this article. Colleagues, actually, I've published this article. It's there online. It was published in the African Vision and Eye Health Journal. So I'm just looking at that now. So yeah, the CD ratio in the right eye was recorded as 0.3 and 0.4. Now, I've seen in other presentations where colleagues are saying that if your CD ratio it's greater than 0.6, that's when you may suspect glaucoma. And in other sources, they're saying if it's greater than 0.5, that's when. You see now, which one is correct? Look at this confusion. Which one is correct? It's this issue of normative data. We still have to do studies as researchers and enumerate a number of African patients to determine the correct normative values for our own specific patients, so that we may know how to diagnose properly. I may sound controversial or in whichever way, but let's talk about it. That's what I'm presenting. So for me, depending on the source of information, material cannot just determine. You cannot, and nothing else. No.
Prof?
Now, I sent this patient to the Eye Institute. Yes.
Sound is gone again. Let people reconnect. Can we all hear us?
Okay.
I think you can. Can you indicate if you can hear? Back on. Yeah, I see people are saying back on, back on. It's fine. Thank you. Okay. You can go. Continue.
Okay. Okay, I'm sorry you were cut off there. Let me repeat myself. I'm saying that I was looking at this article, which I've actually published in the African Vision and Eye Health Journal on this. I was indicating that in the right eye, I recorded 0.3 as a CD ratio and 0.4 in the left eye as a CD ratio. And I was saying that other sources are saying that you should say that you have a problem with the CD ratio once the CD ratio is greater than 0.6, and others are saying once it's 0.5. Now I was asking, then which one is correct? Which one should we use? Because if you are a lecturer at the university and a student gives you that value of 0.6, another student gives you 0.4, another one gives you 0.5, then which one do you mark right? Now it's about time for us as researchers to enumerate our own people in studies, in big studies, to determine our own correct normative values that we can use and consider in the diagnosis of glaucoma. So the CDR or the CDR ratio, the asymmetry for me in this case it was not significant in diagnosing glaucoma. So I've referred this patient to the Eye Institute for further evaluation, and the patient came back in 2014 with a report from the ophthalmologist. Now, this may not be very clear. If you look at the visual field plot analysis there, it actually just provided a baseline for future visual field analysis. And the left eye there was showing mild peripheral vision loss. Okay, with all these factors considered, including the reliability indices when measuring the field or when doing the field analysis, we did consider the number of fixation losses and the false positives in your total deviations, which just actually compares with the data of patients of the same age from different countries. And of course, we need to look at the pattern of deviation. For me, I feel that now that the right eye actually did not have anything. There was nothing to worry about in the right eye. If you look at that picture, if you're able to magnify it there. The left eye, yes, on the periphery and also looking at the total deviation, you can see that, of course, yes, there were some issues there with peripheral visual loss. Okay, it was not conclusive at this stage, and perhaps that's why the patient did not go back to the ophthalmologist again, because the ophthalmologist only sent those reports to me, and the patient came to me with a report, and I said to the patient, you need to go back to the ophthalmologist, but she didn't for 2 years. For 2 years, she didn't go. Now she presented again for routine eye examination in 2017. Now, when I checked her again, the neuroretinal rims appeared to be slightly thinner than what I saw in 2018. This was almost 4 years later when she came back. And this time, she had not done anything with what the ophthalmologist had advised her, but she should come back for follow-up examination, and that she must come back to me after a year or two. She had not done any of those things. Now she came back, I examined, the neuroretinal rims appeared slightly thinner than what I saw in 2013. But of interest, IOPs were within normal range. So they were not responsible, the IOP. The IOP was not responsible for the thinning of the neuroretinal rim. No, it was something else. At this point, I said to the patient, please go back to the ophthalmologist. I know you say you can see very well, and indeed when I measure your visual acuities, you see very well, 6.6, which is good, not a problem. But it was difficult for her to believe me because she could see, and what I was saying did not make sense to her. And this time, she did go to the ophthalmologist. She went to the ophthalmologist, and he gave her a report to give me in an envelope with these pictures. This time, it was conclusive that she had normal tension glaucoma. Now, let's quickly look at this picture here, taken by an OCT, courtesy of Dr. Daya of the Eye Institute in Pretoria. If you look at the green color there, normally it represents 95% of people of the same age with the same results. And the yellow one there, it represents less than 5%, people of the same age with the same or expected results. And the red, normally it can be red there, sometimes it's pinkish, I don't know in your slides, how does it look like now, but it looks pinkish on my side. In Dr. Daya's ones that he sent me, because this is no longer the original, it looks red. So it also depends on the kind of the OCT that you use. And I know that some of you colleagues have these things. So if you look at the solid line, the black solid line there, it represents the baseline findings at initial consultation. So when she first went there, she was still within normal limits. And it does make sense if you compare, if you look at the gray scale there. If you look at this gray scale, you can see of the right eye. You can see, for me, actually, I think there's nothing wrong, as I indicated. Although the caption says that figure 2 below the plot analysis there, it says that showing a baseline field of the right eye and left eye with mild visual field loss. I think it should have indicated that in the left eye, this mild visual field loss, because in the right eye, really, actually, there's nothing. If you look at it, you can see that she's actually within normal limits. And even when she came back, now, here's the issue. If you look at the green line there, it's somewhat below the black solid line. And that shows that there was some loss of retinal ganglion cells within the RNFL. I hope you can see that. And if you look at the left eye, the baseline data, the black solid line there, that's what it shows. But the green one there now shows that there are some changes. And it is upon this basis, that Dr. Daya was able to initiate this patient on glaucoma medication. Now, as you can see that in that slide, it was saying that OCT results showed that the retinal nerve fiber layer was slightly below limits for the patient of this age. Look, going back to this, it is important, colleagues, that we do research and take into consideration the values that we find of our different patients so that we may consider them in the determination of glaucoma in these patients. Because these values, as I was talking to my fellow ophthalmologists, they actually represent what is happening in the US and in Europe, because this is where this OCT is coming from. It doesn't consider the retinal nerve fiber thickness of our people in Africa. So those are some of the things that you need to consider as and when you deal with this kind of patients. Now, if you look at the field analysis here now, this was now when she went for the second time. If you look at this visual field plot analysis, is it? If you look at it and compare it with the previous one, you compare it with this one, there are changes, isn't it? Compare it with this one, you can see that there are serious changes. We have considered the number of fixation losses, the false positives, the total deviations, the pattern deviations. We've considered all of those. And we could see that now there was some mild loss of peripheral vision. Now the patient was then started on alpha again, and this was prescribed as indicated in that slide. The patient was seen by me until 2018, and she continues now to see the ophthalmologist every 6 months. So basically, that is what is happening currently with this patient. Now, I believe that, colleagues, from this, you can learn one or two things. You can learn that, or you can see that it is important to always consider all the things that I've been indicating from the beginning when you are dealing with this kind of patients. Now, let's quickly look at what literature says as part of discussion, recommendations, and conclusion. The pathogenesis of normal tension glaucoma remains unclear. Indeed, it remains unclear because as we were talking with my fellow ophthalmologist from Montana Hospital, he said to me, also, it is possible that you may find that a patient has undiagnosed hydrocephalus, which is mild. Now, this simply accumulation of fluid in the brain. Now, which will cause gradient intraocular pressure and may give you wrong readings. And you may then think that your patient actually has higher IOPs, but not because the patient has IOP. It could be because of the pressure within the brain itself that is caused by hydrocephalus. It is possible. And these patients, sometimes they may present with complaints of mild headaches to, what is this? Migraines, because of the hydrocephalus, and that may also affect your IOP. It is possible. And also, we actually went through a file of one of his patients who had hydrocephalus, which was diagnosed by a neurologist, but initially it was thought that the problem is the intraocular pressure. But it was later then discovered that no, it was not the intraocular pressure, it was the hydrocephalus. So you need to take good case history when you deal with your patients. So that's what I'm saying there, that careful examination by the optometrist may lead to a positive diagnosis and proper referral. Narrower neuroretinal rims are common in patients with normal tension glaucoma. So if you see a patient with narrower neuroretinal rims, you need to consider that patient, or rather treat that patient with suspicion to be having normal tension glaucoma. There may also be a corresponding visual loss when you see this kind of patients if you do a field analysis. And of course, there may be other clinical findings which may include disc hemorrhages, splinter hemorrhages that you would normally see in the disc. But then again, these were not observed in this particular patient. Now, the introduction of OCT in diagnosing glaucoma is very helpful. It changes the whole game, because now here's the issue. If a patient comes for the first time, it gives you baseline data, so that when the patient comes again, you are able to see whether there is any fiber loss compared to the initial results. So that's how OCT. So it's actually an objective method of quantitatively assessing the damage of the optic nerve head and the nerve fiber layer over a period of time, as I was indicating. Now, it also provides evidence of visual loss that a patient. Look at my patient, the one that I saw. It was difficult. It was very difficult for me to convince. That is why she took 2 years before she could go and see an ophthalmologist. She was like, this one is out of his mind. I can see, I'm okay. Why is he referring me to an ophthalmologist who's going to charge me more? I didn't have this sophisticated machinery to help me in showing this patient that indeed there's something happening inside your eye, irrespective of your visual acuity. I couldn't convince the patient otherwise. So the patient stayed at home and went to the ophthalmologist almost 4 years later, actually. That's when she started taking medication. So OCT helps in showing the patient the evidence that is so much required in convincing the patient that, hey, look, you have a problem. Because remember, in most cases, glaucoma is asymptomatic. There may be no pain, there will be nothing, no headaches, nothing. Of course, there may be headaches in extreme cases, but in this case, in my patient's case, there was nothing. So it was difficult to convince me, rather to convince this patient that she must go and see an ophthalmologist for glaucoma management. Now, so OCT may help you in convincing your patient to agree on an aggressive therapy without challenges. And as such, colleagues, as part of the conclusion of this presentation, we should be diligent when we approach this patient. We must practice our profession to the tilt. It must not just be about beta 1 or 2, which frame you want, how much is it, your glasses will be back in 5 days or so. It must not be just about that. There is more to it. I'm worried that it is possible that we may be having a lot of under referrals, a lot of false negatives. What are you doing about that? What are you going to change? you have the tactical acumen, you have the tactical know-how, you know what to do, you can do it. Thank you. That is the end of my presentation, colleagues.
Thank you so much, Prof. Colleagues, can we now take questions? We will be taking questions through the chat section. So if you can just post your questions to Prof. Sithole, and then he will respond to them, and we can then interact. Unfortunately, this we cannot allow people to come in and talk. Otherwise, then the connectivity will be very slow, and then some people might be kicked out. So we can only allow people to ask questions through the chat sections. So let's allow some questions, and then Prof can then assist us in responding to those questions.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be responding.
The first one that I saw was that can you please repeat the point on how hydrocephalus relates to glaucoma and IOP?
Oh, okay. No, thank you. What happens is when there's too much fluid in the eye, rather in the head, it puts a lot of pressure against the globe. Now that creates gradient pressure within the eye. It makes the pressure within the eye to go higher, to go up. And when you measure, you'll find that the pressure within the eye is higher than it should normally be, simply because of the gradient pressure that is caused by the fluid within the brain. So that influences your IOP. It may not necessarily mean that the patient has higher IOP. No, it may mean that the pressure that is caused by the fluid within the brain is the one that is causing the pressure to be higher. So you should exclude that. But then that diagnosis may be done by the neurologist. And this is why you need to take proper case history. You need to know the ailments of your patient, where the patient has been to, who consulted with the patient, what happened, and all sorts of things, so that you may correctly diagnose the patient when you're dealing with glaucoma. I hope that covers that question, Chair.
Thank you. The next question is, what is your normal, let me just quickly go to the question. What is the normal OPP, Prof? That is the question.
Look, I don't have the specific value for the ocular perfusion pressure. But I just know that if there is some disturbance of the vasculature within the eye, it will affect the mechanism that allow blood to flow. Now, for me, I relate it to your blood pressure, your arterial blood pressure. If you take the mean arterial blood pressure and minus the IOP, you'll get the mean ocular perfusion pressure, which I don't have at this point in time. But if you consider the arterial blood pressure and you minus your IOP, that can give you an indication of what your OPP could be. But at this point in time, I don't have the exact pressure as to what could it be. But that may assist you. So it is important, colleagues, that you measure your systemic blood pressure and consider the arterial IOP, rather the arterial blood pressure, as well as your IOP. Then from there, you can determine your OPP.
Okay. The next question says, what is the baseline central corneal thickness?
Yeah, that's interesting. I think it should be less than 555 microns, according to literature. So just consider that. You can research further around that, but it's somewhere around 555 microns.
Okay. The next question says, thank you for such informative presentation. Can you please repeat IS and T configuration?
Okay. Let me go back to that picture. Okay. It's not without an O. It's not.
Can you start that going back to that picture again, Prof? We lost you there for a minute.
Yeah, I'm okay. I'm on that picture now.
Okay, yeah.
Now I'm saying that the ISNT configuration, the ISNT configuration, they call it the is not without an O. I hope you understand what I'm trying to say. Now, if you look at the picture there, the inferior neuroretinal rim, compare it with the superior neuroretinal rim. Now, according to the configuration, it says that the inferior neuroretinal rim must be greater than or equals to the superior neuroretinal rim. Now, if you look at the inferior neuroretinal rim there, it's greater than the superior. It's in line with the configuration that the inferior neuroretinal rim must be greater than or equals to the superior as inferior. The configuration should be such that the inferior neuroretinal rim is greater than or equals to the superior neuroretinal rim. Now, in this case, you can see that the inferior neuroretinal rim is somewhat greater than the superior neuroretinal rim. You can see this, the thick black line is slightly bigger than the upper one. Now we compare the S and the N, which is the superior and the nasal, greater than or equals to the nasal neuroretinal rim. With my good stereoscopic vision, I can determine that the superior neuroretinal rim is slightly bigger than the nasal neuroretinal rim, based on these lines that we have there. Now, finally, you compare the nasal neuroretinal rim with the temporal neuroretinal rim. Now, the configuration says that the nasal neuroretinal rim must be greater than or equals to the temporal neuroretinal rim. Now, in this case, again, if you look at it, somehow the nasal neuroretinal rim is somewhat greater than the temporal neuroretinal rim. But then again, it gives room for the nasal neuroretinal rim to be equals to the temporal neuroretinal rim. Similarly, it does give room for the superior neuroretinal rim to be equals to the inferior neuroretinal rim. The vertical CD ratio will be smaller, and the horizontal CD ratio will be bigger in almost all patients. And going back to the other slide from the ophthalmologist, you can see that the temporal neuroretinal rim, it's much thinner than the nasal neuroretinal rim. And remember, the ISNT configuration says that the nasal neuroretinal rim must be greater than or equals to the temporal. Now, the greater than part of the nasal neuroretinal rim being greater than the nasal, being greater than the temporal neuroretinal rim, it's covered. But the equals to, it's a no contestation. It doesn't apply. Hence, I flagged that to say there must be a problem there. I hope that suffices.
Thank you, Prof.
Chef, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. The next question is, you mentioned that OCT and IOP values are usually based on studies done in US and EU. Are these studies current or otherwise with values based on patients of African descent so that we can use those normative values when looking at our patients?
Look, currently we don't have normative values of our African population, but I have seen a study of a PhD well, a PhD study that is being done at UKZN. It's looking at normative values of binocular vision anomalies, for example. So there is some light at the end of the tunnel. Researchers are starting to enumerate data from African populations. But at this point in time, the normative values that we use are of people from Europe and the US. At this point in time, there is nothing. But of course, like I'm saying, that there is hope. I see UKZN is leading in that part. There are studies that are being done, but they're looking currently at anomalies of binocular vision, the normative data, your convergence insufficiencies and all those things. That's what they are currently looking at.
Okay. Your sound is very bad, Prof.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, now we can hear you.
Am I clear now?
Yes,
Should I repeat what I was saying?
Yeah, just
okay.
After you
I was saying that. Okay, I was saying that the values that your OCT uses, that your visual field analyzer uses, it is values of, or it's data of people in the US and in Europe. There's nothing of African origin. Now, I was saying I've seen that the University of KwaZulu-Natal is taking a lead. There are studies that are being done, but at PhD level, where they are looking at anomalies of binocular vision. They are collating those normative data that can be used in determining, and there are some studies also which were done here in South Africa, and I think they were done at UKZN as well. I'm not so sure if there's anything that was done at UJ, but what I've seen is something that was coming from UKZN. So there's something that is being done currently to collate data that can be used in the diagnosis of different diseases from an African perspective.
Okay, thank you.
I think that's the Chair.
Yeah, the next question was that how effective is conventional eye drops in reducing the progression of retinal nerve fiber loss in normal tension glaucoma?
Look, I think it also depends on the type of drugs that you use. But at this point in time, your Lumigan is a drug of choice, and it seems to halt the progression of nerve fiber loss somewhat when you do your field analysis. If you plot your field and you check the total deviations, you check the data of what is happening, the baseline and all that, you'll realize that there seems to be a halt in the progression of nerve fiber loss when you use the current drugs that are available in the market. So I would say somewhat they are working. There's nothing else that I can say about it other than to say the current drugs of choice, your Lumigans that are normally being prescribed today, they are working, they are trying to halt the progression of nerve fiber loss.
Okay, thank you. The next question is, when should you worry about symmetrical physiological capping?
Now, when there's a difference of, say, two, remember, before I say, remember, when we measure the CD ratio, let me go back to one of the pictures. Now, if you look at that picture, for me, it occupies almost 70%. The capping, it's almost 70% of the total disc. I hope that is clear. Now, if you look at it, then we can say that the cap disc ratio is 0.7. Is 0.7. Now, literature says that if there is a, in other words, we can say of 20 to 30%, using the same configuration of saying that if this capping is 70%, right? If this capping is 70% of the total disc, it means the CD ratio is 0.7. Now, if there's a difference of another 20 to 30, in other words, of 0.2, 0.3, then that is a risk factor for glaucoma, the asymmetry between the left and the right eye, according to literature. I hope that is clear.
Okay, the next question says, does Prof advise that we do pachymetry on all patients, especially above 40 years of age, as part of screening for glaucoma, since its corneal thickness has correlation to IOP?
Look, I would say if you have the means, if you have access to pachymetry, to the pachymeter, you can do that. You have nothing to lose. It will just give you a reliable data, to work on. So I would say yes, if you have access to the instrument, do it. But it is not mandatory. It is not mandatory. You can still diagnose correctly without the pachymeter.
Okay. Thank you. Then the next one is the effect of hypertension on OPP a positive or a negative?
Look, low blood pressure will have a negative effect. Why am I saying this? Because there won't be enough energy to propel blood through the vessels to reach the tissues in the optic nerve. Simply put, if you have low blood pressure, however, the opposite may also have some detrimental effects. If you have higher blood pressure, there may be ocular manifestation of hypertension in the eye. So I hope that suffices, Chair.
Thank you. The next one is, may Prof please again just summarize how we analyze the OCT nerve head scans according to the colors and the solid black lines?
Okay. Let me just go back to if you look at this visual field plot analysis, it may not be clear. I'm not sure if I'll be able to. I don't think I'll be able to magnify it here. For a start, it's a lengthy process. Let me indicate that, but I'll try and summarize it. It's a lengthy process. You need to look at, for a start, you need to be sure that, remember, in most cases, when you start analyzing these gray scales, the patient is gone. So you need to make sure, for a start, that you are looking at the right scale of the right patient so that you may give the correct analysis and intervention strategies for the right patient. You need to look at the fixation losses. Sometimes the state of the patient may determine the outcome of the results. So some patients may not concentrate as and when you are giving them the light stimuli when you are taking when you are doing the field analysis. So you need to look at the fixation losses. You need to look at the false positives. They are there on the far left of the analysis of the plot. At the top there, where there are names, we have your false positive range. You also have your total, your number of fixation losses. Those things you need to consider in line with what you are going to see in the plot analysis. Now, in most cases, the grayscale does not mean much if you have not looked at the number of fixations or false positives that the patient has given you. Now, if you look at the first grayscale there, and you look at what you see downwards there, where you see some black dots, the two scales there, they compare what the patient is having currently with what is available in the data, in its own data as the instrument. Now, what happens is, if you look at the plot analysis there, you can see that there are few dots. but it doesn't show whether the numbers are minus or positive, whether the patient has seen the correct stimuli, the size of the stimuli. It doesn't show clearly there. But I know from the original that this was within normal limits, and the other one on the far right, the plots there, they indicate if whether the patient had some other opacities that may have influenced the grayscale on the upper right there. So in this case, this grayscale is not influenced by any opacities, and that is why you see that the grayscale there, it's clear, and it compares very well with what is happening in the database of this particular instrument. Hence, you don't see anything there. But if you look at the other one, the left one, there's a lot of things happening there. The fixation losses were within normal limits. The false positives were within normal limits. But then again, it was outside the normative data, the normative values. But also, it was not influenced. If you look at the other plots there, it was not influenced. If you look at the pattern deviation, it doesn't. Unfortunately, it doesn't show clearly. The pattern deviation indicates whether the patient's grayscale is influenced by other opacities within the visual system, whereas the total deviation compares with the database within the instrument itself to give what is happening in the grayscale. I hope it's well simplified, Chair.
Thank you, Prof. I have 4 more questions, colleagues. So if you can just hang on and not leave until we are finished with all the questions, so that we can all benefit from the answers. So the next question, it says, what about diurnal pressure fluctuations? Does this affect IOPs and CCT?
Yeah, actually, when I was working on this, there's somewhere where I was looking at diurnal pressure. You know, it does have an effect. Diurnal pressure plays a fundamental role, especially in normal tension glaucoma. Okay, here's a perfect example. And this is what I discussed with one of the ophthalmologists. Why then do you prescribe an eye drop that lowers IOP in normal tension glaucoma? Why do you prescribe a drug that will lower IOP in normal tension? Because remember, in normal tension glaucoma, the IOP is within normal limits. So then why do we then go on and lower it? We're taking into consideration the possibilities of diurnal variation. Especially at night, it is possible that pressure may go higher. Those are the discussions that we were having. And then the drug will come in to assist at that level. I hope that suffices, Chair.
Okay, thank you. The next question says, what is the prevalence or the correlation of glaucoma in hypertension patients? Can we safely that the hypertension is one of the risk factors? Look,
there are correlations. Like I said, there is a study that I did a number of years ago at UKZN. We did find that there were correlations between higher blood pressure and IOP. I'm not saying higher IOP, just IOP in general. Now, higher blood pressure has a propensity to cause increased IOP, not just normal blood pressure. So, in most cases, when you measure when you are dealing with glaucoma patients, try and see what's happening with the systemic blood pressure. Measure the blood pressure. If it's normal, it is okay. But also, if it's low, it's a problem. If it's high, it is also a problem because there are correlations. So try by all means to always measure BP in your patients, as in not only when you suspect that this patient might be having glaucoma, as a routine examination. All patients that come to your practice, measure BP. That machine, that automatic machine that we normally use, not the sphygomanometry, the complicated one. That one, it's around 500, 600 at this camp. Buy it and use it. It will help you. It will help you in a number of ways. There are correlations. And of course, like I said, there is a study that I've done on this. You can find it online. It's a published study. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. The next question is definite diagnosis of glaucoma that's only possible with an OCT analysis?
Please repeat that question, Chair.
Is a definitive diagnosis of glaucoma only possible with an OCT analysis?
No. Remember, OCT is just an objective means of concluding whether the patient has glaucoma or not. OCT was not there in the past. It's a new thing. Well, it has been there in other countries, but recently here in South Africa, and perhaps in other areas of Africa, it has not been an instrument of choice in determining the presence of glaucoma. So you can still determine whether one has glaucoma or not without the use of an OCT. But OCT, it just works more like a retinoscopy. It's just an objective means. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Second last question. When calculating OPP, do you deduct IOP from systolic pressure amount?
Yes. I would say yes. Just say yes. That's what you do. I think there's a slide on that. I just can't recall whether it's in here, whether I've included that here, but it's there. Chair, are we going to send somehow this presentation to the participants?
Yes, we can. With your permission, Prof, we can send this.
Okay, yes, we should do that, because I think some of the things I've covered them in the or I might not have touched or talking to them, but they might be here in the slides.
Okay, thank you. The last question is, would MIGS be beneficial to normal tension glaucoma?
Chair, I didn't get that. What is MIGS?
Can the person who sent that question just clarify what MIGS is?
Because there are a lot of acronyms that mean different things.
Shalene Sullivan, can you please indicate what MIGS is?
Yes, please.
Let's just see if we get an indication. Just give. Okay, we're not getting anything. Colleagues, I see some of the colleagues are dropping off. Please note that we would like you to stay until the presentation is done. Okay, migraines, minimally invasive glaucoma surgery. That is what it means.
Come again?
Minimally invasive glaucoma surgery.
Just repeat that for me, Chair.
Okay, the question is, so it would be, would minimally invasive glaucoma surgery be beneficial to normal tension glaucoma?
Look, now I'm just using my knowledge in responding to that. I don't understand the rationale for doing surgery for normal tension glaucoma, because I don't think surgery is indicated in normal tension glaucoma. So I don't see the rationale for doing such a surgery for a normal tension glaucoma. For me, that is not indicated. It is not an indicated means of managing normal tension glaucoma. Your minimal surgery, as you put it. So perhaps it's one area that one may need to look at. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much, colleagues. I think we are slowly approaching the end of this session. I've been asked to repeat what I mentioned earlier on with regards to the BlueKonnect platform when we opened, as some people say that they've missed it. So what I said when we opened is that as healthcare practitioners, we are faced with so many challenges. challenges that threaten our financial viability, our clinical independence, and our relevance and existence. The remuneration model imposed on us by medical aid threatens our financial viability. People who are outside who think there is money in healthcare challenge our clinical independence, and the fourth IR challenges our existence. Whilst that is a great concern, what is more concerning, however, is that as healthcare practitioners, we are not talking about these challenges. If we are not talking about these challenges, then the chances are we are not doing anything about them. One of the reasons we are not talking as healthcare practitioners is that we are fragmented as a collective and find it difficult to talk across our man-made borders. We all belong and associate to specific organization, groups, and countries. As a result, we are unable to talk to other groups, organizations, countries because they do not belong to us or they are not one of us. BlueKonnect is a platform that aims to break those barriers. BlueKonnect and its character named Blue aim to provide a platform that will facilitate and promote connections, dialogue, sharing of information amongst healthcare practitioners. Blue is the color of the sky, and the sea is the color often associated with stability, tranquility, and calmness. It symbolizes trust, wisdom, intelligence, faith, and truth. Most importantly, it is not associated with any group, racial or otherwise. So BlueKonnect is an independent platform that aims to create a blue discussion in healthcare in Africa, which essentially means that it is a platform that is going to be full of wisdom, trust, intelligence, and truth. It aims to facilitate a robust, reliable, intelligent, and thought-provoking debate and interactions amongst healthcare practitioners. Only through such debates can we really move forward as a sector in Africa and provide solutions. And then I also said that in the next few days, you will not only be getting CPD interactions or CPD sessions, you will also get interactions or debates and or sessions on issues that are happening around our industry, around our sector, so that we can start facilitating those dialogues. So colleagues, that is all what Blue is all about. It is not a representative body. It does not seek to align with any particular organization. It's just simply a platform where people can come and share ideas without necessarily fearing to be rebuked or fearing to be cast and or people fighting with you. So essentially, it is just a Blue platform for people can feel free to come and associate and then share ideas. With that said, I just want to remind you to I have sent an email address to say that please send your OP numbers together with your email address that you use to register for this session to that email address so that we can allocate your CPD points. The email address, I've put it on the chat, but for the purpose of those who did not see the chat, the email address is cpd@bluekonnect.co.za. Again, it's cpd@bluekonnect.co.za. So please just email your email address that you use to connect or to register, and then your your HPCSA registration number, and then we will take it from there. In the next few days, we will be advertising another session on business management. Next week, Tuesday, we have another session with Dr. Pex Ramela, and I will then keep you informed and then keep posting the adverts on the sessions that are coming up. Thank you so much, colleagues. And I see there is a question to say, when does BlueKonnect go live? Is there a site? How do we connect? Yes, there will be a site that will go live very, very soon. And we will then advertise that site once it goes live. For now, there is a Facebook page. You can just like the Facebook page, then you will get all the updates as to the development. Thank you so much, colleagues. I wish you all stay safe and stay at home. Thank you. And Prof. Sithole, thank you so much for facilitating and presenting this wonderful informative session. And I hope you will be presenting more in the coming future. Thank you.
Chair. Thank you. And to my colleagues, thank you.
All right. Thank you all, colleagues. I'm going to be closing the session now. Thank you.